everybody. I did have a question mark about whether to play the Power Thetans intro because it seems a bit, I didn't think it was quite appropriate, but then I thought about it and I was like, no, Neville really was a Power Thetan. He really, really was. And I thought actually it's an appropriate one. So welcome everybody and thank you for joining, and hello to the wonderful Danielle. Thank you for coming. How are you holding up?
Yeah, good, thank you. Honestly, I think I was just telling you a few minutes ago that I'm just riding the wave of grief. So, you know, one day I'm fine, another day I'm not, but that's okay. I'm not depressed. I'm just feeling the loss of the here of him and the now of him, his presence. He had a huge presence. You know, he was 6'3" and he had interesting stories all the time to tell, and just him just being here in the room was enough. You could just feel it, you know. And I do still feel him around me, I do, but yeah, it's you have to ride it. It's just something we have to go through, and it's a natural, very natural human process, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Neville's loss is felt by so many people. He was such a character, you know, from my interactions with him and the wonderful, he always had a story to tell and I loved it. He was a good character, and hearing what other people had to say about their encounters with him, and you know, his loss is definitely felt by lots of people. You know, you're not alone in this. And I mean, let's talk a little bit about who Neville was. For those of you who don't know, Neville was one of the first 19 members of the Sea Organization, right, back in the 60s, and he rose the ranks, and he ended up being L. Ron Hubbard's auditor. He was on the ship with him. Do you want to maybe tell us a bit more about his life inside, because he was a significant person in the early days of Scientology?
Yeah, well, like me, he was in Scientology from a really early age. So he started, I believe he said he was 8. And his mother was going to lectures in Holland Park. They were living in Harrow, and then they moved to central London, just off Tottenham Court Road, just around the corner from Fitzroy Street, where there was an org. And but LRH had, I think he lived in Holland Park, and they used to go there for lectures. And Nev would be looked after by his grandfather, because initially he was still living in Harrow. And his mother had gone to a Scientology lecture, and Nev was left with his granddad, and his granddad slumped to the floor one day when his mother and her husband, Joe, Nev's stepdad, had gone to a Scientology lecture in Holland Park. And he was having a heart attack, and he said to Nev, you know, I don't feel well. And he died from a heart attack. And Nev had to go, and he was a young lad, and he had to go next door and get neighbors who came along, and they rang the place that they were having the lecture in. And his mother got really annoyed that she'd been interrupted at the lectures to have to come to deal with the grandfather who had a heart attack. And then from age 8, he was traveling to Ireland by himself. He would hop on the train and go down to the docks, and then he'd get the ferry across to Ireland, to Larne, I think, is it? And then he would go from there, I don't know, by another train down to Kilkenny, and then he would be picked up and taken to his grandmother's for the summer holidays. I mean, so from a very young age, he had to be independent. He was really streetwise, and he learned his trade of selling hats and belts on the markets in London, in the East End. And his playground was pubs, clubs in and around Tottenham Court Road, Soho. So you can imagine he learnt to wheedle his way in just by having street smarts, you know?
Yeah.
I swear that he would have got into places underage, you know. And he's got some lovely stories to tell he always said that if Scientology hadn't come along when it did, he could have taken the wrong path, because some of the contacts that he was associating with were people like the mobsters.
I I remember him saying when I had him on my channel once, him telling
Yeah.
the story of like him, I can't remember what it was. It was just he had to go and deliver something or pick something up. And it was like he got this sense of, no, I'm dealing with these proper gangsters here. These are people you don't want to mess with. So he did the job and he left and he was like, I don't want anything to
That's
do
right.
with
It was a gang boss by the name of Charlie Richardson, I believe. And Nev was a young lad who'd gone into the pub and was having a drink. And he called him over and Nev's go, yes, Mr. Richardson. He said, I want you to go over to this casino, wherever it was, over on the other side of London, and tell this such and such a person that Mr. Richardson wants to see him at his own convenience, meaning like right now.
Yeah.
And Nev was just a messenger boy. So he took this message to this guy. And by the time he got back to the pub, the guy was already there. And then Mr. Richardson said, get this lad a drink. So he gave him a drink. And Nev said when he walked away from that pub, he decided then and there he was never going to go back again, because that would have been the beginning of a really, it really would have not been good. And he used to go to football matches with his granddad. To his home team is Harrow Wealdstone, just called Wealdstone. And to this day, they're not doing brilliantly at all, but he would follow them every week religiously and see what they were doing. And he gave money to them. He always kept his subs up with them. But his big football club was Arsenal. And that's something that he was very passionate about, and always found every morning he would read racing results, because he was part of a syndicate for racehorses. He followed flat racing and hurdles. We always had a little bit of conflict about that, because so many horses died during some of these races, especially hurdles, and I hated it. But nevertheless, he did that. And that was another passion of his. And he just had a real zest for life. You know, he loved to know what was going on. He liked to watch the news and see what was what. So, interesting.
Yeah, and he had such a good character as well. Like anyone who spent even 5 minutes with him would know, you know, he always had this wit, this charm, this typical British sense of humor, and he was just a joy to be around. And there was never a dull moment. Like I don't ever remember sitting in a room with Nev and it being silent. There's always a story that he's telling, and it's some of it. If you had no idea what Scientology is, you'd be thinking this guy's insane. He's just saying all this rubbish. But no, it's like when you know about Scientology, and you know he actually witnessed all this stuff, like going to the high seas with L. Ron Hubbard on his ship, and you know, like the story of how he had to go from one ship to the other because one of the ships had been cast up on the rocks, and so Nev jumped in a lifeboat to sail L. Ron Hubbard across these stormy seas so that Hubbard could assume control of the other ship. Like it's stuff that you just it's fairy tale stuff, but it's absolutely true that like that was his lived experience, and he liked to share that with people, which I think was really, really lovely.
The thing with him, he did love people, and he did love an audience, and he did captivate them. The one thing with him is he was completely unique and individual. He did not suffer fools gladly, and he would never be told what to do. He was his own person. And in Scientology, he would never have survived long if he'd ever been in the Sea Org for a long time or anything, because there's no way he would do what he was told. If he felt it was wrong, he wouldn't do it. And that included LRH. So if Ron Hubbard was telling him, no, I won't do it. And, you know, he refused to sign a billion-year contract. He wouldn't sign it.
But I think also like Hubbard must have respected that to some extent, because he still let Nev be a part of the Sea organization and still had him in his close circles. So
he did. And he stood up to him, and he was friends with the family, you know, Mary Sue and Diana and Suzette, they were his friends. And, you know, I'm just trying to think. What he did is he saw the person. So it didn't matter, I keep saying this, but if it was the Queen of England or a janitor cleaning the streets, he didn't care what you did or what you stood for. What he cared about is you, the person. And he would cut through all the crap and go and find you in amongst all of that. And people turned to, he was a really good mentor. He was really good at giving advice to people. And his customers have told me how you know, regardless of the work, because he always talked to them about their personal lives. He knew their wives' names, their children's names, where they went on holiday, you know, and these were customers and clients. There was never this kind of frostiness between them, sort of like this staidness, you know, well-to-do sort of stuff. And he would just cut through all of the bull and just talk to the person like they were in the room. And if they were struggling, they would turn to him for advice. And I could see the switch go off in his brain when he was in that mode of being a mentor. He was amazing at helping people who were struggling. And I've had customers come to me since he passed, just telling me how appreciative they were of him guiding them through their business, you know, lives.
And the truth is it's the same when you look at his Scientology life, you know, like talking about the overboarding and stuff. He cared about people, which is not something that you hear a lot about now in Scientology, with Miscavige at the helm and all of this abuse and harassment, all this sort of stuff. Like, people being thrown overboard by Hubbard. You know, there's this story of Nev jumping in after them because he knew that they couldn't swim, and, you know, keeping them up in the waves while they, you know, sought a way to rescue them. And Hubbard obviously
but the devil in him on that story was that this woman was thrown overboard who couldn't swim, and he was disgusted at that. He dived in after her, rescued her, and then he decided to play a trick on them upstairs on the top, looking down. And he pulled her under the running strake, which runs around the side of the ship, and so that they were hidden, and went round the other side, and just to freak them out for a few minutes, to say, "Oh God, look, what have we done?" You know. And I think Hubbard was probably pissed off with them. He didn't care. This is what mattered, is that woman was saved. You know.
And not only that, he wanted to teach them a lesson, to explain and show through actions why it's not okay to do that. It's not like he just jumped in, saved her, and then went back up to the top of the deck and, you know, yelled at someone. No, he was like, no, I'm going to make them worry here because they need to learn a lesson, which is a great testament to who he was.
Yeah, absolutely. And also there's no doubt he was a rogue. You know, he loved playing tricks and things like that. He just loved it. And that started when he hated his school. He went to Harrow Grammar with the likes of Michael Portillo, you know, and it was like he hated it. He didn't like how he was treated. He was caned often because he was naughty. He didn't want to be there. And, you know, he told stories of the scouts were doing marches, you know, parades in the grounds, and he decided to be really naughty from one of the windows, and they were going up 1 2 3, up 1 2 3, and he would go about turn when they were supposed to be going straight or something, and he got them all over the place and then did a runner, you know. Oh God. And then they were I remember him telling a story about they were doing a cross-country race through Northwick Park, kind of like a paper chase. And he hated it. So he went and hid in one of I think it was in the rugby club. And then when they got there, he'd put water on himself and sponge makes himself look wet, and then join the end. You know, things like that. Just, a one-off, unique. And the other wonderful thing is that his love of music, you know, because of his going around all the clubs in the 60s, he went to Apple Studios, and he went all round to all the clubs in Soho when the likes of David Bowie and the Rolling Stones were all playing, and he got to know them personally. He was hanging out with them. He's got wonderful stories about all of them, you know.
Yeah, he was such a nice guy, and I think I wanted to bring up. I published an article on my blog, Scientology Business, yesterday. I reached out to a bunch of people who knew Nev over the years, and I thought it'd be nice to read through some of the stories, if you'd be up for that, about their memories of Nev. Let me get it up here. I forgot to put the link in the description. I'll do it as soon as the stream's over. But just go to Scientologybusiness.com and you'll see it. It's up there. This is him. Lovely Nev. I love that picture. It's such
Yeah.
this is Nev. Like, that shows who he is, just in the way he's smiling, his cheekiness, his wit, you know. I love it.
He lost 4 stone since that picture, you know,
Yeah.
and that was only last summer. Just shows how
Yeah.
quickly he went down. Yeah.
I also want to, actually, before we do this, let's read some of these comments in the chat here. Lisa Terry says, "Hi Alex, Danielle and all, spoiling us this weekend. Thank you so much. I'm here and waiting." SV Crusader Alini says, "Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the chat. Please remember to hit the thumbs up and send all your love and prayers to Danielle tonight." Educon says, "I don't know much about Neville, so I'm watching. My sincerest condolences to Danielle."
Thank you.
Ahon Puds says, "Rest in peace, Neville. I saw your interview on Peeling the Onion a year ago. It's very interesting to learn more about a man I've mostly heard through the stories of John Atack." Yeah, absolutely. And we got lots of people just saying hello. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Linda's here. So sorry, Danielle. Deepest sympathies to you and your family.
Thank you.
All right, let's read some of these comments. Where are we? Here we go. Okay, so this is just, I won't read my blurb of just who he is, because we basically covered all of this about when he left. He became an instant target for the Guardian's office. He got declared and so on. These are some pictures of how people might remember him when he was younger. Were these taken after he left Scientology or during Scientology years?
No, because remember, from the age of 8 until 1982 or something, he was still involved in Scientology.
So these could have been taken while he was in the Sea Org.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they were.
Yeah, absolutely. First story from Janice Gillum Grady. "I was only 11 when I first met Neville. He was the first Sea Org member I met. He was on mission to St. Hill and went out of his way to find myself and my siblings to give us a message of love from our mother, who was in the Sea Project with Neville renovating the Avon River, which is one of the ships that Hubbard had. He was a great storyteller and knew how to add flavor to make it more interesting. Neville was known as a rebel executive, a man of his word. He did what he thought best and got things done, despite knowing what the consequences might be, while also being fun-loving. We stayed in touch over the last 50 plus years. I even interviewed him on Scientology Peeling the Onion, where he was able to tell stories of his personal experiences and give us all many more laughs. Nev, we will all miss you and your wonderful sense of humor."
Yeah.
I think that point actually there about his loyalty is something that I wanted to bring up, because, you know, even he audited L. Ron Hubbard and lots of top Scientology executives, but he, not because he was loyal to Hubbard or Scientology, but because he was loyal to his word, never shared anything. Like, if someone confessed something to him confidentially, even if it was in Scientology, he kept that with him and he didn't share that with people. And that just says who he was as a person, right?
Yeah. He wouldn't even tell me. He wouldn't tell me anything, you know, if it was in session. No, it's private. Yeah. And so it should be.
Yeah. A lot of people have asked me, they said, "Oh, you know, do you reckon Danielle's now going to spill the beans about what Hubbard was like and his private auditing sessions?" And I said, no, I genuinely don't think he even told you, Danielle, because he's loyal to that privacy. No. You know, not loyal to Hubbard, but
no, I mean, he would tell me stories of encounters he had with Ron or that sort of thing, but he would never tell me if anything was in a session, you know, told privately. He, you know,
and that's one of those things that you don't, like, Scientology, like, you don't lose despite leaving Scientology. Like, if you're a loyal person and you keep your word, that's who he is, not the person Scientology made him, right? And that just goes to show who he is as a character, right?
Yeah. And
next,
he would always, you know, if he would rescue somebody in trouble, he would, but he wouldn't, and he would take the mick if it was completely ridiculous, you know, like when they were on the RPF, he and the other people who were on the RPF with him, they weren't going to take any bull from anybody either. And they absolutely thought, why should we eat beans and rice when we can club together? Because some of them had some money, because he, you know, he was an FSM, he was making money outside of Scientology, within Scientology regging, but he also worked outside of Scientology. So he had his own money, and they decided to buy some steaks, and they were eating better than the people who were in the SEAL coming for dinner. And there was a guy called Bruce Glushko who was absolutely incensed about this, but they had all the receipts and it was their food. Why not? You know, that he would not allow anybody to stop him if he wanted to, you know.
Yeah. And that's probably what led to him being declared a suppressive person and stuff, because Scientology wants you to conform, and if you're the sort of person that stands up and speaks out and says this isn't right, then you don't gel with Scientology, especially what it became in the later years, maybe not at the very beginning.
But also remember, he also used to say, remember that he knew their secrets.
Yeah.
So talk about, you know, in Scientology we talked about missed withholds. There would be many of those with them because they were all sitting in session with him, and they didn't know whether he would out them or not. And I mean, being the loyal person to just the whole ethos of being a mentor, you keep it private. But they didn't know that he, you know, so they were a bit anxious about what he could say.
And also, what a contrast, right? Because Scientology don't do that. Scientology force you into a room and get you to sign a document admitting to all these crimes that they can then later use against you when you leave, right? Because that confidentiality is broken the moment you speak out against Scientology from their perspective, and they will say whatever they want to paint a bad picture about you. And what a contrast, this so-called church that's meant to be a religion, that's meant to respect confidentiality, priest penitence privilege and all of that, spilling all of the beans. And you've got Nev here, who was the one taking in all the secrets and kept them to himself when he left. And he said, no, even though I'm against this organization now, I'm not going to do that because you respected my confidentiality when you said it to me.
Absolutely. And and he never would. He was very loyal to that.
Yeah. Deanna Ross here actually says, hello, Danielle and Alex. I'm grateful to Nev for stopping Hubbard from making my mother go up the crow's nest. He probably stopped a very serious disaster. Peace and love always.
Well, what actually happened, Deanna, is she did actually go up the crow's nest and was petrified and froze in fear, and he went and rescued her.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was she a child at this time?
No, well, Deanna might know. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
But still, just one of those brutal punishments that Hubbard inflicted on people, right?
Yeah. If you were afraid of heights, you know.
Absolutely. The next story is John Atax. Do you want to say anything before we move on to John's story?
Yes, so John, there is a paragraph where John talks about an overt and withhold write-up that Neville was forced to write. He'd been locked up in the basement of the manor, and they would not allow him to come out until he had written up his overts and withholds on some, on paper. And he wrote one, and they weren't happy with it. And they said, no, you've got more crimes than this. You've got to write more. And he said, I haven't got any more. I just want to get out of here. And they refused to let him go. And they kept him for hours. I don't know if it was, I don't know how long it was. But they refused to let him go so he made up all of this bull and he wrote it down. But Scientology took this and elaborated on it. And John, you'll see what John wrote. And Nev took them to court because it was slander and libel. So they had to redact it all. But then nevertheless, they still come out and say, well, he's a very dangerous man. They still declared him a suppressive person. And they used some of it in his SP declare. And that was just utter, total made up bullshit.
Yeah. And it's classic. That's what they do, right? You know, from my experience, which was 50, 60 years after Neville's experience, the same thing happened to me, being locked in a room. You can't leave until you confess to doing something wrong against the church, just because they want that signed statement to use against you. And I just think it's incredibly brave of Nev to have actually taken them to court and say, no, you're lying about this. Like, I didn't do these things.
No. And, you know, Alex, I've always thought, I wish he had left the ship by the time I got to it when I was age 11, 12. And when I was locked up in the chain locker of the ship, if Nev had been on the ship, he would have got me out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. Let's read this. Do you want to read it or do you want me to read it?
Oh, you go ahead. It's fine.
Okay. I first met Nev when decorating his mum's house in 1976. He gave me a piece of sausage, asked if I liked it, and proceeded to tell me it was Polish horse meat. Nev was mischievous, to say the least. His parents must have been too, naming him after Britain's least popular prime minister. Our paths did not cross again until 1983. I'd left the Scientology mother cult, and in my quest to find out why the church had imploded, was questioning everyone about their experiences. Nev was the first to describe overboarding to me. At first, he was dismissed as an unpleasant but passing aberration. In our second conversation at the Monsoon restaurant in East Grinstead, his face fell when he admitted that it was terrifying being hurled, blindfolded, with ankles roped from 25 feet above the water into the sewage of Corfu Harbour. Nev delighted in the suppressive person declare and writ of expulsion issued against him, which says in part, when Neville first entered the church, he had behind him a trail of criminal acts, which kept him from realizing the miraculous gains of Scientology.
Can I just say there, Alex?
Yeah.
The reason he laughed there is he was 8 years old, right? Yeah. When he first entered the church, he left behind a trail of criminal acts. That's why he found this amusing, because he was 8 years old. What
That's
trail?
Such a good point. I never even thought of that.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, this is pre 8 years old Nev. His horrendous criminal acts, per his own out-of-session write-ups, extend as far back as 1965 and span the entire scale of criminality from assault and battery, brutal violence, theft, armed robbery, drug pushing, smuggling, seducing minors, illegal gambling, car theft, arson, accessory to illegal abortions, embezzlement, using false credentials, pimping, violence for hire, forgery, and fraud. All per his own statements.
Aren't they
bastards? That's 8 years old, Danielle.
Oh, God.
Outrageous. Nev explained that he entered the church at the age of 12.
Well, it was earlier than that. He was 8. Okay. Yeah.
Excuse me. This was when his parents took him to meet their friend L. Ron Hubbard at St. Hill Manor. By making a legal complaint, Nev forced Scientology to withdraw.
I just say, sorry. Yeah. That's not true either. They met in Holland Park before they even got to St. Hill. And he said his first words to LRH were, "You're fat."
Were they really?
Yeah.
I'm surprised he was ever allowed anywhere near Hubbard again after that.
Well, they made him do all of his TRs and his concourses and everything because it was a way of trying to control him, you know.
Yeah. Wow. Nev forced Scientology to withdraw their ridiculous statement. He told me he'd been locked up by guardian Jane Kember and ordered to write up his overts and withholds, so he concocted the list of crimes of his infancy.
His infancy.
Yeah. Kember would later go to prison for another instance of false imprisonment. After her release, Nev was instrumental in discovering that she was publishing scurrilous attacks on independent Scientologists under the sobriquet Mark Martini as part of her re-entry program to the mother cult. In 1967, at the age of 20, Nev was one of the 19 original members of the Sea Project, which soon morphed into the Sea Organization. He was proud that Hubbard had coined the term "doing a Nev" to mean following the letter of an order without coming close to its spirit. Nev was into his third bankruptcy when I interviewed him in 1984. He was a jovial salesman with a barrage of questionable schemes forever on the boil. He gave me ammunition by admitting he'd bought handsome Lob's shoes while
handmade Lob shoes.
Handmade, yeah, sorry, handmade. What did I say? Did I say hand?
You said handsome.
Oh, handsome. Sorry, handmade Lob's shoes while maxing out his credit cards prior to filing his bankruptcy, but never wore them because they pinched. Whenever he had the better of me in some joke, I'd remind him of those shoes. I always enjoyed my time with Nev and have fond memories of him. He made fun of the world and he made the world fun.
Yeah, so there's a story. I didn't know about 3 bankruptcies. I certainly knew of one where he hadn't paid a tax bill because his wife at the time had used the tax money to bail her dad out of a business. He was running a business up here back in the 80s, and it was failing, and she was trying to bail him out. So he didn't have the tax money to pay the bill. So and the tax HMRC refused to allow him to pay in installments or whatever, and they insisted he sell the house which he did, and then paid it off. But at the same time, because he was going to be made bankrupt, he decided to max out all his credit cards because they get wiped off.
Yeah.
He's bankrupt, so that's what he did. He just maxed them out, and they just cut him up in front of him. But the one thing about him is he would fall down and he'd get up again. Yeah. And he was very good at making money. And the church, St. Hill, would often call him just before 2:00 on a Thursday because their stats were down, they needed money, and he would go out and he would reg people and get somebody signed up for courses or what have you. And he was bloody good at it. And he made sure he got his commission, but he was very, very good at it. And he's always been the sort of person to find out what people need and want and then go out and get it. So, he would sell tires for trucks, for example, and get them sent over from China. Or he sold Royal Dalton. He sold Wedgwood. He sold China, Crystal. He sold ships in bottles, and he'd started up a glass company where they made in the 80s when it was something that people needed and wanted. And there was some big sheikh in some Arab sheikh who ordered a massive one with gold sails and everything, which they made. And the Glass Centre in Sunderland put on an exhibition a few years ago, just probably 5 years ago or something. And they came to him wanting to know the history of the ships in bottles and things. And some of the people who'd worked for him had gone to work at the Glass Centre. And they remember him really fondly because he employed them and they did these ships. We've got one here. I mean, it's lovely, but it's not something people want these days. But back in the day, they wanted it. So, yeah.
I wonder if that's why he was allowed to get away with being so mischievous in the Sea Org, was because he brought money through the door. And that's what L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology want, is money through the door. So they let you get away with murder as long as you're making them money. And 100%. So if he wasn't making money, if he wasn't a good salesperson, Hubbard probably wouldn't have let him get away with
well, it was Neville who told me the story about Red Sharp, who was one of the original Scientologists. He was a rich man, and he lived at St. Hill Green. He had a house in St. Hill Green, and he knew that he heard that the manor was coming up for sale, and so he told Ron that the manor was coming up for sale. Ron didn't have the money to buy it. Reg lent him the money on the understanding he'd get paid back, and he never got paid back and was kicked out and declared. Interesting.
Outrageous, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
I wonder if any of his descendants are still living and would like to pursue that in a court of law. Because can you imagine? Like, that's the sort of thing where if you can prove that actually it is their property and it was a loan, they could reclaim St. Hill.
I do wonder. I know.
And then, you know what, an even better, what a boss move would be to reclaim St. Hill, but then not kick Scientology out and say, you can stay there, just pay me rent. And force Scientology to pay rent to an SP. That would be hilarious. Anyway, let's move on to the next one, which is Robin Scott. We love Robin. I haven't had him on the channel for a while. He caused a bit of controversy on my channel when he showed up for his mixed practices and beliefs on Scientology and cannabis and all of that. But he is a good-hearted, genuine person.
So Robin was Nev's son-in-law, brother-in-law. Right. So at the time he was married to Nev's wife, Kathy, who sadly passed away from motor neurone disease, was the sister of Robin's wife. Yeah.
And Robin is a true character, let's just say that. And so I reached out to him and I said, Robin, can you write a statement for Nev? And he said, yes, but you have to post it exactly word for word as it is. Do not edit it. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to edit any of these. It's your opportunity to share a memory. But he was very clear that it has to be exactly as he wrote it. So this is what he said. I first met Neville Chamberlin soon after I joined the Scientology Sea Org at St. Hill, East Grinstead in September 1973. I was a brand new recruit on the basic training course, and Neville was the old hand doing a retread for being in trouble. Classic. Neville had been in the Sea Org since its foundation in 1966 and had worked closely with the founder, Ron Hubbard, for several years. It was through Neville that I got to know about Hubbard. Being in trouble seemed to be pretty much a way of life for Nev. He was always very much his own man, didn't conform, and tended to go out on a limb. Above all else, he had a great sense of humour and was always good company. But Neville was also a highly intelligent man who took a keen interest in what was going on in the world around him. While widely liked, he had a broad network of contacts around the world. It was through Nev in the early 1980s that I learned about developments within the Church of Scientology and an independent movement within the Sea Org. Highly to his credit, I would say that Nev played the pivotal role in facilitating the important changes that followed. We fell out finally over his I can never say that word. Predilection
for whiskey.
For whiskey and mine for cannabis. But he was a quite unique character in my time and a valuable influence on my life.
Yeah. So the whiskey reference, Nev, after selling the China and the ships in bottles, etc., went over to selling whiskey, and it was his passion, and he loved it, and has got some very, very good close friends in the whiskey industry, and it's something that he was very good at.
Yeah, and it's wonderful that he carried on that business, right? And again, using his sale tactics, he didn't get what's the word, discouraged by his troubles in Scientology, and he was like, no, look, I'm going to take the skills that I have and use them in a way that's not harming and abusing people, selling whiskey and doing that.
Yeah, and he would always, if there was a problem ever, nothing was too insurmountable for him until he reached when he was far too ill to do anything about it. But prior to that, if ever there was any issue, he would always say there's a solution somewhere, and he would think upon it. He would lie back and even sort of sleep on it, and the next day he'd come up with an answer. So he was really good at overcoming difficulties. He never let them stop him doing what he wanted to do. And what was lovely about the whole whiskey thing was it was important that he sold single malts. That was important to him. And he was a very old school whiskey man, and he wouldn't have anything to do with the Diageos of the world, the sort of big umbrella organizations who sold sort of David Beckham whiskey and things like that. That's just not sophisticated enough, right? So he's single malts, quality malts, well-established, old school distilleries.
Independent distilleries, right?
Independent. Yeah. That was really important to him. And he had very good relationships with them,
And that probably goes back as well to his character and caring about people, right?
Oh, yeah,
I mean, I have to tread the line very carefully here because I work with Diageo and other big alcohol companies and all this. But there is something to be said about an independent company being run by a family or by a small group of people. And that shows Nev's passion for understanding people and wanting to support their business because he cares about those people, and it becomes a bit less personal when you have a dealings with a big multinational company, for example. So
well, no, that's right. And people like Diageo, they have a place in the market, and they supply supermarkets and what have you across the boards. But Nev was more into doing the independent, small, big scale but small sort of customer base. Yeah,
specialized, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And here's this lovely picture of you and Nev. This is so sweet.
Bless him.
Bless him. All right, the next one is from Ira Shalif, who says, Neville was an impish rogue. He always had a twinkle in his eye, and he pulled off unlikely feats that helped AOSH UK, meaning St. Hill, do its thing. Even Jane Kember, who looked at him askance, and at most other Sea Org members askance as well, understood that I defended Neville because he helped keep on the lights.
That's true.
It was as if St. Hill was one more sandbox in which he could play and enjoy life. I believe we first met in another sandbox, a Royal Scotsman lifeboat, when the prevailing tides kept us from completing our practice mission and find 3 floating objects and return to the ship. Instead, we were washed ashore onto the Spanish coast in a restricted military area. Yep, Neville did his best to claim that we nevertheless had a successful mission when we finally returned. Nope, he didn't win that argument. Many years after we all had left that world, I was delighted to learn that Neville and Danielle were making a life together, and from what I could see, a very happy one. Thank you, Danielle, for helping our friend navigate the rougher waters of the last year or two. He is safely in his next port.
Yeah, and it's the sad thing about his health, it wasn't just the last 2 years really. I came up here in 2016, and his health had started to deteriorate already. So it's been a long trail. But the one thing is, he fought like mad. He fought like mad to keep going through all adversity on his health, and he was a real soldier, you know. Yeah,
bigger than life, right? The sort of person that, like, you know, he would never let his illnesses or whatever get him down. He was like, no, I'm still, he still had that spirit of life in him, even when he was going through difficulties.
That's right. And he was in hospital for a week before he died, and just the day before he went into hospital, he was dictating emails that I had to send to people, you know.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, the next one here is from Karen de la Carrière, who says, I have fond memories of Neville Chamberlin, a former auditor, counsellor of mine at St. Hill. This was in the early 1970s. Neville was a renegade, a rebel, a nonconformist. There was no way he could fit in with the tight rules and regulations, high authoritarian cult, and it is amazing he survived 30 years. His SP declare is so sleazy and full of hyperbole and venom that it seems like a satirical parody, but it is not. It reads like a revenge SP declare. After all, Neville had local East Grinstead police escort him to pick up his belongings when he was exiting the Seal, which when translated means he was not safe going back to that place without law enforcement to safeguard him.
Mm-hmm.
Neville, you mischievous, cheeky gangster. Fly high and continue to laugh at how you played the game your way. Love
Absolutely
to you.
Right. Yeah. And I know that he met Karen, not just at St. Hill, I think before she'd even come in, I think he told me some stories. So it's really, you know, he cared very much for people. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's true, like, this is what when I said earlier about his stories are hard to believe. It's like, no, he lived he didn't just coast in life. He lived a life like fully to the max, and his stories are incredible. And this is testimony that he lived life to the fullest, you know.
And I'd love it because he also managed athletes and he managed a band. In fact, that just reminds me, I need to contact one of them. He used to be in Scientology and he's left now, but I would like to try and find people like, Eddie Maffey and, you know, the athletes that he worked with. I would like them to, I need to find them. Yeah. I need to do that.
That'd be lovely. Well, if anyone is watching this and is in contact with them, please reach out and
Infant Christie, Mick Jagger, of the light. I'd love to hear some stories, you know.
Absolutely. All righty. The next one is from Barry Stevenson, who says, I was supervisor of Class 1B of the briefing course in 1966 for a short time.
Class 4, is it?
Well, he wrote Class 1V.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Okay, I thought it might be Class 4. Okay.
Maybe it's Class 4.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because it's but that would have been Ivy. I don't know. But anyway,
yeah.
I didn't want to edit anything that people sent me. I wanted to publish it exactly as it was sent. Yeah, so for a short time, while the normal supervisor took his vacation, and Neville was one of the students. He had a coach, Haviva Cass, and they were doing the dating drill. For some reason, his coach was ARC broken with him, that means upset, and would not ask for a checkout, although Neville insisted that he was ready. I noticed them arguing and, of course, went over to see what was going on. Some details are now lost with time, but the upshot of it all was that I allowed Neville to try and get the date that Haviva had written down. I have to say that Neville was confronted with a very dirty, tight needle. Understandably so, considering his coach was so upset with him. But on that day, I saw the best e-meter handling I've ever seen, as Neville went straight to the date without a miss. I was very impressed, needless to say, because I knew that I could not have done it, and I was a good e-meter reader myself. There we go. So he was good with the meter.
Yeah.
All right. And we have Hannah Whitfield here, which is the last one. It's a longer one, but we'll go through it here. I was deeply saddened to hear of Neville's passing, though Nev and I had never had the opportunity. God, I need to do some word clearing. I'm fumbling over my words here, Danielle. I don't know what.
You want me to read it? I don't mind reading it. Though Nev and I never had the opportunity to work together in Scientology or the Sea Organization, Nev was a good friend and shipmate to me and others who were there with him. I first knew Neville in late 1967 or early 1968 when he arrived as a new Sea Org recruit on the Royal Scotsman. Hubbard had just purchased the big ship, docked her in Southampton. I like how they say Hubbard had just purchased it, because actually it was his minions.
Someone else purchased it for him in his name.
Yeah. Docked her in Southampton to complete cleaning her out and testing her main engines and other motors and pumps, generators in the engine room, and get her ready for her upcoming voyage south to the Mediterranean and Valencia. Many new recruits came on board in Southampton of all ages at that time. I always liked Neville because he was so sure of himself and his abilities. Nev also genuinely liked himself, something I admired about him. He did. I mean, he did. Yeah. Neville loved having fun. He was also a tough, rowdy guy, ready for adventure any time of day or night. He was also cheerful, loyal, and honest, and mixed well with the other deck and engine room crews. Nev and Joe Van Staden were the best at letting rip and swearing when the opportunity arose. He mixed in perfectly with other deck and engine room crew, and I was always hearing of some misadventure he'd gotten into. And just as an aside, he's talking about Joe Van Staden. Joe used to be married to Jill Van Staden, who married my stepfather. It's just this kind of interlinking. Anyway, there's more there.
It's a very small cult, Scientology. Like everyone, you're only 2 degrees of separation, right? Everyone is connected to each other somehow in Scientology.
Yeah. One such event occurred after Hubbard assigned the Royal Scotsman an ethics condition of liability. The harbour authorities asked the Royal Scotsman to move to another berth to make way for an incoming vessel. While moving, a storm arose. Storms at that time of year around Valencia are common and always severe, and the Scotsman crew, mostly new and woefully untrained, couldn't manage the situation. The big ship dragged her anchor, hit submerged rocks, and broke her propeller. Hubbard, who was on board the Avon River at the time, was livid. I did not see the event occur, being in Alicante on LRH orders to find and establish a location to which the advanced organisation students on board the Royal Scotsman could move and continue their study or auditing on Hubbard's newly released OT3. I heard about the debacle later, and how Neville and one other, if I recall correctly, somehow got a lifeboat lowered and managed to get Hubbard into the lifeboat and over to the Scotsman, despite the raging wind, waves thrashing and pounding on the harbour wall and nearby rocks, so that Hubbard could take command of the stricken vessel and get her off the rocks and re-anchored safely. Nev's action took real guts and courage. Nev, I can see you joining up with all the other wonderful people we have loved and worked with in Scientology and the Sea Organization who have left us. I wish you tons of happiness, more fun than you know what to do with, and opportunities to be as rowdy as you want. Enjoy the heck out of your newfound freedom, my friend, with my love and hugs and very happy memories.
Yeah.
Hannah Whitfield.
That's so lovely. And I was shocked at how many people came out of the woodworks and were more than happy to send more than just a couple of sentences, nice stories and memories of him. And he'll be missed for sure.
Yeah, he will be sorely missed. And bless him.
I think it's important to talk a little bit about the process as well, because if you think about, like, although it's obviously not easy to go through losing somebody, especially somebody so close to you, at least you have the freedom to experience that how is natural and how you want to, and go through that journey without feeling like you can't talk to people or you can't say anything because it's end theta or downtone or whatever. Because in Scientology you're not allowed to process grief properly, because the teaching is that you've just moved on to your next life, and being in grief or apathy or it's all downtone stuff, and you just need to move out of that state of the tone scale.
You got to pay and go and have sessions.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you know, the grief's on their tone scale, and it's the kind of thing, you know, it's I can't remember where it is. Can you remember where it is on the tone scale? I can't remember. But basically, you're in grief, and the idea is that you come out of it. And grief, that's not what you do. It's a process that you naturally have to go for, and it's the price that we pay for loving somebody. You know, and it's I'm grateful for it, because it just is an answer to how much feeling of love that you have for somebody, and it's actually honoring them and thanking them, and it's a way of just coming through all the memories and things that you've had together. All of that plays into it, you know. It's really special, really special. And it's different from the grief of, you know, somebody cheating on you or something. But this is about true love and connection and bonding. And it's not something, oh, you just got it. People say you can just, you know, he wouldn't want you to be unhappy, just be cheerful. No, fuck off. Sorry. No, it's not. It's not. It is literally, I need to do this. I need to go through this. This is healthy. And in Scientology, it's all internalized.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy.
No, and it must be difficult to navigate, of course. And it's certainly, that doesn't make it easy, but at least you have the freedom to experience it how you want to, and not be afraid to feel low one day or feel sad or have moments of upset. Like, that's okay. That's all part of the journey. And, you know, it won't be like that forever. But there's also no pressure to snap out of it or move up the tone scale, or, you know, suddenly stop acting, you know, miss emotions and all of this. Like, it's, you know, you're just being banky, you know, your reactive mind. It's like, no, this is part of it. And these are human emotions. There's nothing wrong with it.
No. And, you know, there's something interesting here. Nev, when I first met him, we dated when I was 21 initially, and he was older than me, wanted to settle, have kids and get married, and I wasn't ready. So we split as friends, and then all these years later come back together again, which is a lovely romantic love story. But what I'd like to say is that my mother was a very loving, soft, gentle human being, and she taught me about emotions and loving. And she never lost that in Scientology. And it's rare because, you know, Nev did lose it. And when I became a nice little Scientology executive after having all my training at Flag, etc., it knocks it out of you. So, but I learned to get it back again, because with my mother once again. And Robin knew my mum, and Ira knew my mother, and they know what a loving, kind, and caring person she was. Nev didn't have that. He didn't have that loving, caring, really sort of empathetic parenting, and it meant that he didn't know how to show emotion. And I'm really proud of the fact that in our relationship, it's something that I've been able to teach him, as to how to show his emotions. And, you know, when I first met him, if he got a card, it would he very rarely put love on the bottom of a card. It would just be, say, you know, dear Danielle, Nev. But by the end of it, I had kisses and hearts and your roses, and, you know.
I was going to say, how romantic, dear Danielle, Nev. But no, like you told me before about how he would consistently buy you flowers and gifts, and, you know, obviously, you know, the whole consumerism and buying gifts isn't like the way to show love, but it is a sign of affection. Like, it's not like he's trying to buy your affection. It's him showing that he cares about you and loves you. And that's such a nice journey from someone who wasn't going to write love in a card to someone that now knows how to express that, you know, in a way that makes you feel
at the very
nice.
end of his life, he was really able to be emotional and to show emotion. And I know that I worked really hard over the last 8 years to help bring that about. And it's very special and dear to my heart, you know.
Absolutely. Well, let's look at some of these questions and comments that I've been starring as we've been going through. Terry Ray's in the chat saying, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you, Terry.
Rob YouTube says, I'm so pleased to be learning more about Danielle's Nev. He was obviously a stand-up man. Sorry for your loss, Dee.
Thank you.
He was such a pleasure to be around, you know. Traveling Panda, rest in peace, Dart Smohen. I miss your post. Yeah. So this is one thing we didn't really touch on when he started speaking out about Scientology in the early days of the ex-Scientology message board and everything. He had this pseudonym, Dart Smohen, right? Which he became quite known in this field.
He did. I have seen sight of his write-up, and it'd be worth us investigating that further and doing a whole thing on it, because it's his story.
Yeah, I've got it. I'll send it to you. Someone compiled a PDF of basically it's all of the posts that he shared on the early Scientology message board kind of forums and stuff about his stories and his tales in Scientology. And he didn't put it together in a book, but somebody else compiled it.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah, and it's a PDF. I'll send it to you. We'll go through it.
Great, because I know that I saw it once and I can't find it anywhere. I'd love to see that again. Yes, please.
Yeah, and it's all his. I haven't read it, but it looks like it's just all of his stories and tales from the high seas and early days. And
I'd like to sort of go through and put it in consequential order and stuff.
Yeah, and add more context, because I'm sure there are things that he wasn't prepared to share publicly that, when he was still kind of under the radar, that he probably would be okay with now.
Yeah.
But he was a real trailblazer. If we look back at the start of the protest movement and this YouTube thing, people have been against Scientology's abuses for decades. This is nothing new. And Neville is one of those people who came before all of us, in speaking out and making a stand and doing what he can to expose the abuses. So we follow in his footsteps. Witness here says, former Scientologists have been saying these things for a while, in my opinion, being forced or confined, forced to make up stuff to confess. This is a nightmare. In my opinion, never trust Church of Scientology lies. Yeah. It's coercion at its very core. And I think Neville's story shows that it's built into Scientology's core practice. It's not, obviously things have got worse since David Miscavige took over, but even before then, these things were baked into it.
Yeah, I mean, he was locked up in the Manor, like we mentioned earlier, but he was also locked up in the Scottish organisation Happy when it was up in Edinburgh, and he was locked up in the basement. And in those days, the pavement is level with the window in the basement, and he broke the window and knocked on it and got a member of the public to call the police. And the next thing they know is that the police were at the door and said, "Let this man out."
What a PR flap.
Absolutely, but he wasn't going to have it. Yeah.
And good on him for standing up, and he didn't accept the punishment like a good Scientologist. He was like, no, I'm not being locked in a room. Even if it makes Scientology look bad, I'm not allowing them to do this to me. So smashed the window and got help.
It was difficult for me because I'm playing with my cat. Sorry. I've got a little laser light. And she's pawing at me and she wants me to play with her. So I'm just playing with the light. So he, what was I going to say? Yeah. So he swore like a trooper, right? He did. The air could be blue. And he also was very non-PC because he still had the old school 1980s way of thinking and talking about people and what have you. And it didn't stop him even today. So, we were in the car, but so you can't say things like that anymore.
I remember on one of the live streams we did together, treading very carefully. I can't remember what it was, but he brought something up and I was like, gotta tread carefully here, Nev. Because I know what you mean, but I don't think the internet will understand what you mean.
And also, he was brought up when he was young, he was sent to a Catholic school when he was young, and he could not because he was bullied by nuns. He couldn't stand nuns. And so there's a school around the corner that all the teachers are nuns. And if we're driving in the car into town and a nun was crossing the road, he'd go. And he called it's terrible, but he called them brides of Satan. He couldn't stand them. And I just couldn't knock it out of him. It is what it is, and he is who he was. But
it's that typical British sense of humor. Like that's not him wishing ill will upon nuns and genuinely wanting harm or anything like that. That's not him actually wishing them harm. It's just that British humor, especially the traditional old sense of turning your pain or your trauma into something funny in an appropriate way. And
he had a very sharp wit.
Yeah.
you know, I wish I had half of what he had in terms of his witness.
Yeah,
or wittiness.
Wittiness, yeah. Deanna here is clarifying, my mother was an out-of-shape middle-aged woman who had flub a session on the first class 8 course. So that was when we were talking about the crow's nest.
Oh, bless her. So yes, so that would have been even harder for her to get up there. And oh, that's so sad, isn't it?
Yeah. And I don't know anything about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if the punishment was going up the crow's nest because they knew that she was terrified of it, you know, rather than throwing her overboard. It's just nasty punishment, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. Traveling Panda, Neville's experience is just another proof that Scientology / Hubbard have always been about money. Clearing the planet was just a smokescreen.
Oh, yeah. And still is.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nisa here, final comment. It is so unbelievable that some of the authorities have been letting them get away with their crimes for so long.
Yeah. I don't know what it's going to take to get them to listen. It's just extraordinary to me.
Yeah. Especially when you consider we've had people like Neville speaking out for quite literally decades, right, about the abuse and the punishment, the RPF, the overboarding. This stuff is baked into Scientology, and Neville has been one of those people that has unashamedly been calling them out for it, even when he was still in Scientology, and yet they are still getting away with it. You know. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for this. I thought this was a really
We've
nice...
still got the funeral, so it's just, you know, there's been an unprecedented number of deaths. I don't know if it's across the boards in the world, but certainly in England, because we've had a flu epidemic, and so it's taken a long time from when he passed on the 26th of January till the funeral. So the funeral's at the beginning of March, and once I've got that out the way, I think I'll feel a little better, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm doing okay. I really am. And I'm blessed to have so much loving support all around me. And that includes people on all these channels. And, you know, I've got cards and flowers and people. Oh, my cat. Oh.
And your cat's wanting to show you some love.
Getting cross with me. And just sort of, I'm blessed. So thank you, everybody. Thank you. Yeah.
The love is just pouring in, you know. Kaz here. Sorry for just joining. Sorry for your loss, Danielle. Deanna's here. Giving you lots of hearts. SP Crusader, Selma. The love is definitely there.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, look, thank you so much, Danielle. And you know, this was a really nice way of remembering Neville. He was such a character. And if you're watching this and you missed the live stream and you're on the replay crew and you remember Nev, leave a comment down below, you know, with your stories and memories and messages for Danielle. And
and then after the funeral, Alex, I'm going to start my own YouTube channel, and I'll do a nice tribute to him on that as well, with photographs, you know. And I'll interview people about him. That might be fun.
Yeah, because people are really interested in these, like, I'm interested in these stories from Scientology in the days gone past. You know, like one of my highlights of my trip to the States last year was meeting so many old timers who were in Scientology during the days of Hubbard, because their experiences were so wildly different to my experiences, but also the same in other ways. And just learning what Scientology was like back then, from a history perspective, is interesting.
Well, you know, it's funny. It's just how things come full circle. So when David Miscavige was 8 years old or something, Nev had gone to stay with the family when he was out on a mission somewhere in America. And sorry, my cat, stop it. And, you know, actually shared a cabin bed or whatever you call them, like a bunk bed with him, with David Miscavige. And then when his family came to St. Hill, David was going to school he was I think a year above me, and then his sisters were in the same year as me, something like that. And they were just kids, you know. We had no idea that kid would turn out to be this ogre that he is now, you know.
Yeah. But of course, the story that he tells Scientologists is that from day one, Hubbard picked him out as, you know, his future protege, and was always going to take over the church after it. And it's all just complete fabrications. And all you have to do is speak to people who were there at the time, like yourself, and who can confirm, no, he was just another kid.
No,
Yeah.
and he believed it hook, line, and sinker. You know, they believe it hook, line, and sinker, and it's not on.
Well, look, all we can do is carry on flying the flag in Nev's honor and of those who came before us, and, you know, not giving up in providing a voice to those whose voices have been taken away. And
do you think at St. Hill they do anything like I don't know if they do this, so when someone's been declared and then dies, do they put out something like, yay, blow to the enemy, you know?
Apparently, I've heard this from sources inside OSA in LA, that when an SP dies, Miscavige cracks open the whiskey.
Wow.
Yeah, because OSA's target is dismissed attackers. So when an SP moves on to their next life, you know, that's an attacker dismissed. And it's horrible, you know, celebrating those who are just calling for an end to their abuses. You know, what sort of church does that? Can you imagine the Pope cracking open a glass of whiskey when someone passes away? No. Where's the love?
Yeah. Wow.
Well, look, thank you so much, Danielle, and I appreciate this, and I want you to know that you are loved and you are cared for. You have this community here to support you.
That's really kind.
We will look forward to sharing your channel when that happens in the future.
Yeah, I'll do it after the funeral.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, thank you so much, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.
Lots of love.